for only a year or two, but really only got involved with DAOs maybe, I don't know, 8 months ago. And it quickly became clear the value as far as sort of nonprofit organizations or social impact, or trying to do things in a way that isn't necessarily 100% profit driven, but at the same time maybe we could realign incentives with this new Web3 technology that maybe we can even incentivize better behavior, whatever it may be. And I've been talking to a lot of people in my network, and everyone's really excited, but it's still been incredibly challenging as far as more or less getting Web 2 people into Web 3, Web 2 people into the concept of a DAO, or Web 2 people into the concept of aligning incentives and restructuring how we work. And so there's been, and then it's all the tools as well. It's which I think particularly this one is a little bit more about is, okay, they're like, okay, sounds cool. Where, how, what does it look like? Is there a UI? And it's like, oh, it's actually like a chat room with with a bank account or something. So I'm just curious as to what you guys have seen as far as overcoming these hurdles. What tools are very helpful for this beginning part of building communities that are not necessarily from Web3, but that's important as well. But regular people, just Web2 people new to this space. How do you introduce these concepts? How do you get them educated? And how do you get them effective on all these tools that we're working on now? I'm at a loss. I'm inviting people. I'm doing a lot of hand-holding one-on-one, a lot of building relationships, just a lot of talking. I find patients being the best part of this, and then you convert them, and then maybe they go and convert other people. But especially with trying to build a very niche community that's caring, not just some sort of degen or DeFi. We want to make a bunch of money. We don't care. We want to be in and out. How do we? That's kind of how I've been doing it, is just one-on-one, trying to get people up to speed so far.
I think I can share some experience with that because, I'm also from Web2 to Web3. And I think one of the main things that I've noticed talking to people are they're afraid to give it a try, to jump into this space. So, and I also do the same strategy that you're doing with among my friends. First, I try to invite them using Binance, this cryptocurrency trading, because that's where they're really interested in making profits, making money. But the challenge is to bridge that interest to this impact DAOs. How do we get them involved? Because the moment I start talking about DAOs, they lose interest. For them, it's like work. And I think if you're not very passionate about this space and making, in believing in mission of a specific DAO, I think it's hard to get them involved. So, and I think since I'm not also a techie person, in my own experience, I think the easiest way and most effective way to learn how it works is to get really involved and be part of the building process. So I was part of the the initial phases of the TEC. So just reading about everything, like it's mind blowing. I didn't understand a single thing, But when you're in that process, you participate in the governance process, and voting, just simply voting in the forum or in Snapshot, you learn by doing it. So I think that's the usual advice that I give to people who are just coming to this space. Like, you just have to get involved and learn by doing it, because it's good to have knowledge, to read something, but I think you will understand it better if you're actually doing it rather than just reading or watching. So that's my experience.
Makes a lot of sense. That's certainly how I've been learning. I just wonder, there is a type of person that is very curious and they get sucked into the rabbit hole. But when I'm trying to for lack of a better word, sell this or push it towards people. How do we, I just, because it's such a deep rabbit hole, and these ideas are so complex, and the technology is so complex. I wonder how people have been tackling, demystifying this stuff, making people less afraid. I wish I had something I could put in front of somebody that was like simple, and it was a little bit less self-serve and more like it just kind of blasted them in the face with everything. But maybe it's just not possible. Or have you guys, what are some successful examples you guys have of converting people or, onboarding them into the space in general? Or have you had none, or failure even?
I'm the person who is waiting somebody to convert me into the space, actually. So
Yeah. Oh, maybe we'll learn with Victor. Yeah. Me and Victor could talk for sure. Robin, you mentioned you were doing some work with
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, I highly resonate with the topic. As mentioned before, I don't have a lot of experience with Web3. I'm pretty new to that. But as I mentioned, I'm a tech savvy person, so I'm on the learning path. But still with Web2 tools, I'm very passionate about organization, structuring, collaboration, communication. And I'm excited about the potential of that. But my challenge is, as we're talking about, the challenge of even conveying Web2 tools to people is still a challenge. Mm-hmm. Because I know the potential, I know how we can streamline communication, all of that. But finding a way to meet people's needs and put that in the context of, it's not only about these tools, it's actually about what we're trying to achieve here. Like that interface or interaction, I'm still find challenging. And I like what you said earlier, with the focus on patience. Like I'm learning to become patient more and more, because I see that's the only way. I like what you say, like taking people by the hand. It reminds me of the quote, like, if you want to go far, go alone. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's kind of like what it's coming back to for me, like the like the slow one-to-one, or like trying to, like, I don't know, talking to people's need and guiding them. And it's this slow, frustrating process, because then I want to go fast, but at the same time, like, going fast slowly, it's kind of like the mindset I'm learning myself. Yeah, that's my 2 thoughts.
That's amazing. Thank you. Go ahead, Ivy.
Yeah, I think also one of the challenges for me is, like, I've been in this space for a couple of years already, and I'm still learning. But the challenge is everything is happening so fast. It's so hard to catch up, and I feel like I'm missing out on a lot of things because I'm too focused on this project. And I feel like, this space, everything is happening so fast. I don't know how we want to slow it down, and how we want to equip ourselves and be more ready, and have more confidence and time, and to try on learn new skills. So that's another challenge, I think, in this space. I don't know if it's only for me, but I feel like it's the same in other communities. Like, everything is happening so fast, and it's so hard to catch up.
I see, like, back just to the Web2 tools, like there is like sort of like a SaaS explosion and a new way of working. And my partner, she has an older boss, and he doesn't even get Slack. So if people are struggling on Slack, or the concept of Slack, and then you're trying to explain decentralized governance, it's such a jump. But where there's a problem, there's a solution. Where there's a will, there's a way. This onboarding experience, I think, has been one of the most phenomenal things I've been a part of, because the commons, the trusted seed, these are all very abstract concepts. And then there was this, just speaking through the process that we went through. I was on a Discord, I saw a link, maybe I went on the Twitter Spaces, and they told us about this. And then I filled out some sort of type form, which was phenomenal. They chose to have us choose a background, kind of choose your own adventure, create your player, which I wonder why they did that exactly, maybe to help organize us and figure out who we are. And then this mural board is phenomenal to have us all on the mural board at the same time. And then having the little metaverse as well. I'm definitely stealing everything from this, and I'm going to try to apply it as well. But how did you guys feel through this process? And is this what you guys have seen so far? Victor, I'm curious, since this is really one of your first forays into this space, how was it? You know, is any of this making sense so far?
It's kind of interesting for me also. I also steal some tools and things like Gather Sync, because I'm facilitating small development teams from time to time and strategic sessions, and I was looking for something collaborative and less boring than Zoom, let's say, with something more interactive and with, let's say, human touch. And this game style, old school game style, it's really nice, and I will give it a try, give it a shot with my team also. So yeah, I enjoy it very much. The rest things are not new to me. Open space technology also is something I tried before, but the scale and the thing about this worldwide schedule, actually we are from the different locations, this is something inspiring for me. Yeah, so to meet all of you and from so different points of the world and with so different knowledge and point of views, and speaking freely and open to any new ideas. So it's really an incredible experience now. Thank you for this.
Does anybody else have any comments on the sort of onboarding process and the tools we've used so far just for this, like today's event and getting started? I thought they were really great. I'm going to start a Telegram channel because there's so much knowledge here, and probably just bother everyone. But I would love for a place where we could all just dump new tools, new strategies that we see, because the space is moving so fast. There's just no way I think a single person can keep up with the latest and greatest. But yeah, if there's any other opinions on the onboarding of the Unconference so far. Also, what does Unconference mean?
I think
love it. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the cognitive load is a bit high, and so I mean, you could say it's by design. It filters out people who are not very interested, and they leave at some point. Yeah, I think if you look at onboarding for a platform, then you try to make it as frictionless as possible. You want to play with the cognitive load, and here I think it's also because the early stage experimental part of it, it's a very high cognitive load for people, so for example, the required digital literacy, the comfort of adapting new tools could be a blocker for people. So like it generally is not for me, but I've had fairly sleepless nights the last 11 days. I became a dad, so my tolerance for using my brain is fairly low. That's just what I'm noticing. I'm zoning out so now and then.
Maybe thank you for sharing. Maybe do you have any just like top of head thoughts about how could the onboarding for this, for example, process decrease the cognitive load? Like, just do you have any top of mind thoughts?
Maybe it was there, but as I said, like the last couple of days, I've been fairly distracted. It's maybe an async onboarding in the beginning that is a bit playful, and that could have helped me I probably would not have been able to do it really. But I think next time that could be nice. So that like there's, because this is a month, right? So maybe if you have an async week where you can run into people, so something like GatherTown could be really interesting for that, where you have like hot zones or time zones where stuff is happening and some of the people of trusted seed are there, so you can ask questions. You remove barriers, like instead of sending an email, you can just have these open office hour kind of experiences in GatherTown. And then also from an organizing perspective, you can now start getting feedback already on how do we communicate the program, how do we communicate purpose. Just to give you an example, when I joined, I remembered that, like when I joined today, I remembered I made a choice. And then I was like, what was the choice? Why did I make that choice? Right? I remember something with 4 options, and then, but it's completely blank. Yeah, that could be a way.
So I wonder, so with the tech bar being so high, what was the old tech bar? Or is like most of the world just they're like email and meetings? Like, is that it? Like, how will DAOs, could a DAO, or how does a very old school nonprofit work? Is it just like there's an office, people come to the office and there's emails? I'm just
Emails,
curious.
spreadsheets, attachments. It's I mean, very much depends on if it's an in the nonprofit sector, digital literacy is fairly low.
Mhm.
So it's not Slack and Discord, it's a WhatsApp group. And so because I'm part of I've worked in the refugee space, and it's very low tech. So it's emails, attachments, maybe a link to a Google document. But that's and then I mean, if you look at Web3, that's really high digital literacy, right? So it is just exclusive, and maybe that's something we need to just be aware of, and that's it. Is where we are in the impact Web3 space, but we need to design to be more inclusive, because there are really amazing minds, especially subject matter experts. Because I think this is one of the problems in the whole blockchain space. Is it's too much tech. It's still about building product without ever talking to a customer about their needs. And so I think that's very much lacking. So we need something that is more open to bring in people and have dialogue. I think that this, because for example, I'm also part of a teacher DAO where teachers are learning about Web3, and as soon as you start using amazing tools but you combine them, like navigation becomes difficult. And like we already had some barriers here, because Zoom, GatherTown, Miro, like as soon as and even if it's only 5% of the people who are not super familiar with a tool, that is a trigger for them to say, well, maybe this is not for me, and then you lose them.
Such a almost tragic thing, because like the nonprofits, at least personally, it's where I see where the most value can be brought, or where there's the most need, and technology can help, but there's just giant middle grounds that it's really hard to cross. That's like you're saying, people are just building products to build a product, not really talking to the consumer, their customer. But I just wonder, have you guys seen anything, even in the Web 2 world, that's really good, that super low literacy, tech literacy, but is still very powerful? Can those things go hand in hand, or is that even possible? I think of Google, it was like one little bar and it was like just type in a word, but it was incredibly powerful in the background. Have you guys seen any great tools like this so far, or anything off the top of your head, or are we just going in the wrong direction lately?
I think one limitation is that there are some areas where you can find them. Like in some ways, the area where Google went with their early search is one ability to do that. But in some areas, if you really want to build something new, it's harder to make it simple, because the complexity comes from like really how many rules have you add on top. Like from the game side, there's like one technique which is not certainly universal, but I think useful, which is that which is kind of adoption. That if you can say that this is like this practice that you know in the real world or somewhere else in the world that you have done, and you can kind of use that as the framework, and there's only one change to that. Like it's like a behavior, you know, and it's just modified a bit. You can kind of steal complexity, but then have it simplified by the fact that people know it already. And of course, that's not only games, that happens in other contexts as well, but it's a kind of somewhat systematized in game design. But I do think it's a challenge, like that you can have a very valuable topic and it might be hard, maybe even impossible to make it completely simple. Maybe another short design technique towards that is you can kind of stagger things. That is, there is an interaction that is utterly simple, that is using fraction of the thing you're building, but that interaction still feeds to a larger system that people can then go up in scales, like essentially like build steps that are integrated to the system itself, which I think is actually a pattern of many like successful social structures in the web or internet at large. Is that like, you know, like take even a basic social platform like Reddit, it's dependent on people. I think it's over 50% never even write a comment. But at the same time, it's those people who start from there who become commenters, then create their own subreddits, even some of them become coders. And ultimately, you're dependent on all of them. But there is the simplicity that feeds the complexity, and that there is an ecosystem that includes all of those parts is probably often one of the better ways to try to solve the complexity, not to try to take everybody to the complexity, but to build the cascade from there.
Yeah, it's the cascading information design principles that they have in games.
Yes.
Yeah, I think about these crazy RPG games, you know, they have all these elements and you first learn how to run around just swinging the sword, but then they introduce you to the magic system, and then there's this crazy combo system. I wonder, even for the tooling, you know, it's like, okay, you're familiar with Excel sheets, you know, well, this is a Google sheet, it lives online. Now we could all work on it, you know. Okay, now, you know, this Google sheet is now we could work on, you know, Trello or Kanban board that is also going to update that Google sheet. And then from that Kanban board, you know, I wonder if we could design something or a suite of tools that has that staggered sort of simplicity to complexity, to eventually land them in a place where they feel comfortable, you know, making a proposal on a DAO, you know, voting on it, understanding the tokenomics and who's getting rewarded for what. I think that's a really fascinating concept, because currently it's like, go to my Discord, read 20 things, download 20 apps and figure it out. And people, it's just way too much.
Yeah,
no,
and with tools, it's always two sides. Sorry, Pekka. It's this is how the tool works, and this is how we use the tool. And Trello is a really great example of a simple tool that you can still use in many different ways. So you don't have to, you shouldn't explain to the user how Trello works. You should explain to the user how you use Trello. Because a lot of stuff about Trello you don't need to know. It's sort of the same with spreadsheets. Like if you could just remove all the buttons and just show the 5 buttons that are needed, it's so much easier to learn how to use a spreadsheet. Like, why do we need to have a button for pivot tables? Like, most newbies will never get there. So just hide that stuff.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat that again? Like, you said like the point wasn't to show people how to use Trello. It was to, I just missed that point.
So I can explain to you how Trello works in general, features, but very often an organization uses a tool in a particular way, and there's much more important information in how do we use Trello versus how does Trello works. Those are both learning journeys that a new person in the community needs to know. And if you're already familiar with Trello, you can skip the how does Trello work part and just focus on how does this team use Trello, and that is the balance that we need to hit.
Thank you so much. That exploded a lot of thoughts in me, because I'm in the process of exactly that for the moment, like onboarding people in my organization with tools, and I'm in the process of like, these are amazing tools. This is how they work. So thank you.
But it also opens like this direction in the last couple of comments, opens a kind of design scope. Like if it takes a Discord, like Discord is solving one thing and it's trying to make it relatively simple. But you could use, okay, now that you have this sort of fairly simple thing, what kind of things could grow from this simple thing, and what kind of things you could build that the simple thing feeds. And while pragmatically you can see that most of those directions are just like how to serve the simple thing, but you could build other things from that. And I do think that design space is wider than what is normally looked at, like these examples you brought from games in itself. Like there's a kind of intentional design that the simple interaction has this sort of design pathway, how it feeds to a more complex interaction, which then feeds to a more complex interaction in itself. And that scope, I think, not necessarily in all cases, but in many cases could offer new ways of thinking about reaching complexity that are sometimes just lost because that angle is not explored enough.
Another thing the Reddit comment made me think about is perhaps not every system or tool should be designed or utilized in a way where people are expected to take advantage of the whole scope that's available. Like you said, not, a small minority of the people actually comment, or go on to use it for what Reddit is possibly capable of. So I wonder with like onboarding people into these communities, it's like, hey, you could just discuss and contribute your thoughts. Hey, you could actually vote on things, or, do something, or hey, you could actually design and contribute and build. So having all that in mind, as far as having not only steps to complexity to, simplicity to complexity, but also having the ability to stop at a certain level and still being able to contribute in a meaningful way. And then just waiting if they get more comfortable to go up the step, or never going up the step and still being able to contribute. I think is an interesting concept, as far as, because the very beginning we talked about people being afraid, and it's like, hey, actually you're here to talk. You can just chat. My thing is sort of about like space. Like, you want to just talk about rockets and asteroids? Like, cool. Like, we're happy to have you here. So I think that's just another interesting concept, as far as having the proper tooling or using your tooling to build community. My head hurts. I'm just thinking about a lot right now.
I like that. That makes me think of also like, to add to the conversation, like how do we need to use this tool? Like, what is the need? Like, what is the purpose? What is kind of like our desired outcome, like for getting the tool? What are we trying to achieve here? Starting from that point of view.
Yeah, every tool has a fit for purpose, and so you need to, and then you can stretch it. Like Trello is one of those examples again. Like, it's very stretchable. At some point it breaks. So it very much depends on the level of complexity that it needs to support before you need to move to more complex tools. But yeah, like organizations that I'm part of that are early stage and shaping, and like finding the tools that are fit for purpose is very often an overlooked thing. Oh, I have experience with Discord, so we can use Discord for that. Yeah, but that's not what it's meant for. So for example, Discord or Slack is not to store files. Like, yes, you can find them back because there's search function, but it's not fit for that. So like, what's the purpose? And then what's the tool that matches that purpose?
I think it's
Balanced with which tool is, sorry, yeah, balance with how accessible is the tool, like how easy is it to understand, because some tools are really, really complex.
Quick question: why do you think we continue doing this session in Zoom instead of going to Gather, to another tool proposed by Max? What are your ideas about this?
I think that's a great point. It's a great example of what we're comfortable with, where if we were inside Gather, we would be able to sit down on a couch and we could have private conversations, or someone could stand up, or we could take a break and go play a game. There's so much more functionality and complexity there as well, but we don't, because we're not ready for it. Like it's silly, or it's interesting. We'll have that patience thing, I think, perhaps, it's humans are silly. It really doesn't make complete sense. So it's interesting, I think.
But I think there is another thing at play, which is like ultimately, I hope there is a point where we grow out of the paradigm of DAO. And one of the ways to grow out of it is to see organization as like in an inherently modular fashion. Like, okay, here are some discourse interaction patterns. And in this space, we can only solve like different patterns for this sort of discourse of having a talk or something. And here's a couple of other kind of decision patterns that could be plugged into the sort of discourse pattern. And then they could be plugged into a record pattern that records them or whatever it is. And I think why I say that's a synergy, this sort of modular fashion with human behavior, is like one of the things people look for in everywhere, but particularly in digital realm, is a certain simplicity. Is like, it's not that I have to learn all of this interface in itself. And of course, if you're modular, you can have simplicity. Like, I think part of Zoom's success is it's only doing really mostly the conversation. There's a little bit other elements, but it's mostly concentrating on that. So if one thinks modularly, you can have complexity, but you can also have simplicity, rather than trying to package everything to one, which is also, I think, one of the problematics in the DAO concepts, among others.
Ivy, I cut you off. What did you want to add, or do we already move on to
Oh no,
a
just
different side of the topic?
just a quick comment on what Robin said about finding the purpose of the tool. I think one thing that we should also consider is like what the problem it solves. I think it's easier to get people on board if you point out the problem that this tool solves, rather than just saying the purpose of that tool. So yeah, just something to comment on that.
Amazing. I think we have a 15-minute break. I have to hop really fast, but I'll be right back. Awesome conversation. Thank you, guys. I didn't realize when I wrote down that idea, I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, now I got to actually lead something or talk about it, but you guys are awesome. So I'll be back. Thank you, guys.